Howdy. First, I want to say I've made a living out of being overrated, and I don't plan to stop here. It's great to be in Turkey. It's great to be in marketing. You know, we marketing people, we're just so damn smart. You know, we're always patting ourselves on the back. I mean, just, you listen to these guys talk about selling phones and the power of phones. You know, something which we forgot, you know, there are now more phones in circulation than there are people. I read something recently that an unforeseen offshoot of that is now the phones don't need us. The phones, the extra phones now, they just talk to each other. And of course, what are the phones going to talk about? Well, they talk about us. They talk about how stupid we are. The phones rehash conversations that we have with our friends and say, do I really care what he had for dinner? Do I really care what he's drinking? We don't. The phones even, you know, the phones, they even can tell if you have bad breath when you're talking. They don't call them smart for nothing. All right. So I call this presentation Lead, Follow, or Get Out of the Way. For no particular reason, I call every presentation Lead, Follow, or Get Out of the Way. Because when I heard it about 20 years ago, I said, that sounds like good advice. It's fun to come to Istanbul. It's fun to come to anywhere where people treat you with respect and they think you know what you're doing, which is not to say we don't know what we're doing. But I have to say, I always feel a little humbled coming to speak to an audience and pretending that you don't know what you're doing because you clearly do. And I think, you know, you can learn a little, a little peanut about a brand and maybe apply it to your career and your life. And I think that's great. But I always am a little uncomfortable doing the, here comes the 10 Commandments. So I won't do that. I think you'll see I don't take myself too seriously, and that is because I'm old. And I wasn't always old, I have to tell you. There was a time when I was the youngest guy in the room. Just like so many of you are now the youngest people in the room when you partake in marketing conversations. Well, I have some bad news for you. Someday, you too are going to be the oldest person in the room. And you're going to wonder, how did that happen? Well, don't worry about how it happened, but worry about continuing to make contributions to something you believe in. Continue to be passionate about the products and the brands and the services that you bring to the forefront. Take that seriously. And you won't get stupider, because I don't think I've gotten stupider. But I think I've managed to sort of learn a little bit here and there to recognize that I can still learn a little bit. So let me, before I eat my whole 20 minutes, tell you a little bit about Absolut.
May I present Mr. Victor Norman?
Mr. Victor, Mr. Norman, you've just seen me do a disgusting thing. But you'll always remember what I just did. You see, Mr. Norman, if nobody remembers your brand, you aren't going to sell any soap. Check? Check. You see, Mr. Foreman, this company gives your agency $10 million a year to spend on advertising. You know why? I'll tell you a secret about the soap business, Mr. Norman. There's absolutely no difference between soap. Well, sales principles are not theories. They're proven facts. Example, beauty soap. beauty soap, beauty soap. Repeat it till it comes out of their ears. Repeat it till they say it in their sleep. Irritate them, Mr. Norman. Irritate, irritate, irritate them. Never forget, irritate them, knock them dead.
That was my grandfather, Sidney Greenstreet. He got me into the business. That's a real scene from a real movie. It was called The Hucksters. Has anybody seen it? From 1947, Clark Gable was a young man there. There was a notion then that if you just are irritating enough, the people are going to buy your stuff. And to some extent, that hasn't changed. Some brands still figure they can piss you off so much until you finally buy them. Absolut wasn't one of them. This is a real quote from a real man. Steve Jobs was unique for many reasons. But one of the reasons that I find most admirable is that he didn't really care what we thought. He didn't come to us and say, well, what color do you want this iPod? Or what feature are you looking for on this phone? He was a man of great taste, great idealism, and the highest standards. He didn't give a shit about research, which doesn't mean he didn't give a shit about consumers. He simply had the attitude, I know better than the consumers. And I think sometimes we forget that we know better than the consumers. That sometimes, if I may kick social media in the ass, this notion of co-opting all the consumers to become, to become not just our brand spokesman, but our brand salesman, isn't necessarily in our best interest as professionals and marketers. He did not make that mistake. So park that thought. However, on the other side, it's also not a good idea to kill your consumers. This is L.O. Smith. He was the father of vodka, and he, in effect, was the one who invented Absolut vodka. About 140 years ago, he figured out a way to take the poisons out so that when you drank it, you can continue to live to drink some more the following day. Now that's thinking ahead. So, Absolut. Is this a brand that can continue to teach us something? I hope so. We had an idea about who our customers were. They're smart, they're educated, they're moneyed, they're interesting people, they are interested in things, just like Monsieur Economides. But I'll tell you something. One thing I learned about targeting your customers is that you can be both wrong and overspecific. How can you be wrong? Well, you can be wrong when you look around to see who's using your products, who's buying them. And one reason you're wrong is because there's this whole nature of aspiration that takes place in society, which is that many people choose to buy the products that are aimed above them so they can enjoy the lives of those above them. Now, when you're selling a $20 bottle of vodka, that's an easier equation to understand than if you're selling a $50,000 BMW. So I learned that don't always be so sure that you know who your customer is and ignore the people who are actually shopping. It's usually much bigger. So, what did we do about Absolut? How do we make it interesting? Well, here we have this notion that you're an interesting person,